The assignment. The transport shuttle juddered as it docked with Helios Station, the worn-out inertial dampeners barely cushioning the impact. Elias Reeves gripped his seat, knuckles white against the faded upholstery. The battered state of the shuttle didn't bode well for his new assignment. Final approach complete. Welcome to Helios Station. Please gather all personal belongings before disembarking. The automated system announced in a voice that sounded like it hadn't been updated since the third galactic expansion. Elias shouldered his duffel bag and joined the handful of other passengers, mostly supply runners and a couple of technicians who looked as thrilled as he felt about their destination. Helios Station wasn't exactly a coveted posting in the Terran Coalition fleet. Orbiting a gas giant at the edge of contested space, it served as a monitoring outpost and occasional repair dock for patrol vessels. It was the kind of place where careers went to die. Chief Engineer Reeves, a lanky human officer with lieutenant's bars and tired eyes, waited at the bottom of the ramp. Lieutenant Park, I've been assigned to escort you to operations. Nice welcome wagon, Elias said, adjusting his bag. I take it the station's chief engineer is eager to hand over the reins. Park's expression tightened. The previous chief engineer had a difference of opinion with command. He left 3 weeks ago. Left or was removed? Elias asked. Does it matter? Park started walking, not waiting for an answer. Elias fell into step beside him, taking in the station as they moved through the corridors. The lighting flickered intermittently, and he could hear the irregular rhythm of environmental systems working harder than they should. The diagnostic part of his brain was already cataloging issues: power fluctuations, suboptimal air recycling, and from the subtle vibration beneath his boots, misaligned stabilizers. Place is falling apart, he observed. Park snorted. You don't know the half of it. Most of the engineering crew have transferred out over the past 6 months. We're operating at 40% staffing levels. Why the exodus? The lieutenant glanced at him, then looked away. You'll see. That wasn't ominous at all. They arrived at operations, a circular command center with holographic displays and monitoring stations arranged around a central coordination platform. Unlike the rest of the station, Ops was immaculate. Screens glowing with steady output readings, floor polished to a shine, workstations organized with military precision. The commander is expecting you, Park said, nodding toward a small office off the main floor. Elias approached the door, which slid open automatically. Inside, the office was as meticulously maintained as operations, with digital displays showing station schematics and system diagnostics. But what caught his attention was the figure standing behind the desk. She was small, barely 3 feet tall, with iridescent blue-green skin that caught the light like polished opal. Her head was smooth and slightly elongated, with no visible hair, and her large, almond-shaped eyes were a startling amber. She wore the uniform of a galactic coalition commander, tailored perfectly to her diminutive frame. Chief Engineer Reeves, she said, her voice surprisingly deep and resonant for her size. You're late. The transport was delayed at the Centauri checkpoint, Elias replied, standing straighter. Commander. Zix, she said. Just Zix. My species doesn't use secondary designations in the way humans do. Commander Zix, Elias acknowledged with a nod. Reporting for duty. Zix studied him, those amber eyes seeming to catalog every detail of his appearance. Your file says you graduated top of your class at the academy, then spent 6 years on the front lines before being reassigned to development projects. That's correct. It doesn't explain why someone with your qualifications is being sent to a backwater monitoring station. Elias kept his expression neutral. I follow orders, Commander. Yes, she said, a hint of something. Amusement, perhaps, in her voice. I'm sure you do. Just as I'm sure there's nothing in your record about insubordination or questioning command decisions that led to unnecessary casualties during the Proxima campaign. So she'd done her homework beyond the official file. Those decisions cost lives and equipment we couldn't afford to lose. And your alternative approach would have saved them. It did, once they finally listened. But by then, We'd already lost the Dauntless and her crew. Zix nodded, as if confirming something to herself. Honesty. Good. I can work with honesty. She activated a holographic display on her desk. The station's condition is critical. Life support is functioning at 73% efficiency. Power grid fluctuations have increased 20% in the last month. The outer hull has microfractures in sections 18 through 22, and those are just the priority concerns. Elias frowned. How long has this been going on? Too long. The previous chief engineer was more interested in maintaining appearances for inspection reports than actually fixing anything. Zix's tone hardened. I don't tolerate incompetence, Engineer Reeves. Neither do I, Commander. Then we might actually get along. She deactivated the display. I expect a full assessment of engineering systems within 48 hours. Prioritize life support and structural integrity. You'll have access to all available resources, limited as they are. Understood. And one more thing. Her gaze fixed on him with an intensity that was almost physical. I'm not here to be your friend or to hold your hand. I'm here because this station is strategically vital, despite what its condition might suggest. If you have a problem with taking orders from someone half your size and not of your species, get over it quickly or file for transfer. Elias met her gaze steadily. With all due respect, Commander, I don't care if you're 3 inches tall and made of plasma. If you know what you're doing, we'll get along fine. For a moment, Zix didn't respond. Then her mouth curved in what might have been a smile on a human. We'll see. Dismissed. As Elias turned to leave, the station shuddered, lights dimming momentarily before returning to full brightness. An alarm blared briefly before cutting off. That's the 3rd time today, Zix said, already moving toward the door. Power surges in the lower sections. Lieutenant Park can show you to engineering. I suggest you start your assessment there. I can find my own way, Elias replied. If you don't mind, I prefer to see what I'm dealing with without the guided tour. Zix paused, studying him again. Very well, but I expect updates every 6 hours. You'll have them. Elias headed for the exit. Engineer Reeves, Zix called after him. He stopped but didn't turn around. The last chief engineer thought he could hide problems from me. He was mistaken. Noted, Elias said, and left. The corridor outside operations was empty, Park having disappeared to wherever lieutenants went when not escorting new arrivals. Elias pulled up the station schematics on his datapad, orienting himself before heading toward the central lift. As he walked, he replayed the meeting with Commander Zix in his head. Her species, the Traxian, if he recalled correctly from his xenobiology courses, were known for their intelligence and longevity. They were also known for their tempers and unyielding standards. The rumors about Zix that had circulated through the fleet made more sense now. The lift arrived, and he stepped inside. Engineering, he commanded. Engineering-level access requires authorization, the computer replied. Authorization Reeves, Elias J., Chief Engineer, TC-7789C. Processing. Authorization confirmed. Welcome aboard, Chief Engineer Reeves. The lift descended, and Elias braced himself for what he was about to find. If the rest of the station was any indication, engineering would be a nightmare. The lift doors opened, and the smell hit him first, the acrid tang of overheated circuitry and leaked coolant, underlaid with the metallic scent of corroded components. The engineering bay was dimly lit, emergency lighting casting harsh shadows across consoles and equipment. A handful of technicians moved about, their faces set in the grim expressions of people who had been fighting a losing battle for too long. Who the hell are you? A woman with grease-streaked cheeks and dark circles under her eyes approached, wiping her hands on a rag that had seen better days. Elias Reeves, new chief engineer. The woman's expression shifted from suspicious to relieved. Oh, thank the stars. Maya Chen, assistant engineer. What's left of it, anyway? She gestured around the bay. "Welcome to paradise." Elias took in the jury-rigged systems, the patchwork repairs, the exhausted staff. "How long have you been operating like this?" "Months." Carson, the previous chief, kept filing requisition orders for parts and personnel, but nothing ever came through. Then he had a disagreement with the commander and was gone the next day. "What kind of disagreement?" Chen glanced around before lowering her voice. "He told her it was impossible to keep the station running with what we had. That we needed to evacuate and do a complete overhaul." She disagreed. And she was right. Elias guessed. "Oh, it's definitely possible to keep this place running," Chen said with a humorless laugh. "If you don't mind working 20-hour shifts and improvising with whatever scrap you can find. The commander doesn't accept excuses. Results or nothing." Elias nodded thoughtfully. "Show me the worst of it. Let's start with those power surges." For the next several hours, Elias immersed himself in the chaos of Helios Station's engineering systems. Every fix revealed 3 more problems. Every diagnostic uncovered cascading failures waiting to happen. The previous chief had been applying bandages where surgery was needed, and now the whole system was on the verge of collapse. By the time he finished his initial assessment, Elias had gone without sleep for nearly 30 hours. He made his way back to his assigned quarters, a Spartan room that looked like it hadn't been occupied in months, and collapsed onto the bunk. Before sleep claimed him, he sent a brief update to Commander Zix. "Assessment underway. Situation worse than reported. We'll have preliminary action plan by 800. The response came almost immediately. 700. My office. Elias smiled despite his exhaustion. 3 feet tall and furious indeed. This was going to be an interesting assignment. The discovery. Elias arrived at Commander Zix's office at precisely 6:59, a datapad tucked under his arm, and the bitter aftertaste of synthetic caffeine lingering on his tongue. 5 hours of sleep hadn't been enough, but it was all he could afford given the state of the station. The door slid open before he could announce himself. Inside, Zix stood on an elevated platform behind her desk that brought her to eye level with most humans. It was a practical solution, Elias thought, though he suspected it also served a psychological purpose. In his experience, those in command rarely left anything to chance, especially when it came to maintaining authority. "Engineer Reeves," she acknowledged, amber eyes alert despite the early hour. "Your assessment." "Comprehensive system failure imminent without immediate intervention," Elias said, deciding that directness would be appreciated. He placed his datapad on her desk and activated the holographic display. "The primary power grid is operating at 42% capacity due to degraded conduits and improperly balanced load distribution. Environmental controls are barely keeping up, especially in the outer sections. And the structural integrity field generators are drawing more power than they should, which suggests microfractures beyond what your initial report indicated." Zix studied the display, her small fingers manipulating the holographic data with practiced precision. "Survivability estimate. At current deterioration rates, 4 weeks before critical systems begin to fail catastrophically. Maybe 6 if we implement emergency protocols and evacuate non-essential sections." "Unacceptable," Zix said flatly. "What do you need?" "Material requisitions, engineering crews, and authorization to take critical systems offline for repairs. The requisitions were submitted months ago. We're still waiting." There was a tightness in her voice that suggested this wasn't a new frustration. "As for crews, what you see is what we have. Command has not deemed our situation a priority." Elias frowned. "With all due respect, Commander, has Command actually seen accurate reports about our condition?" Zix's gaze sharpened. "Are you implying I've withheld information, Engineer?" "No," Elias said carefully. "But I am wondering why a station of strategic importance would be left to deteriorate like this. It doesn't make sense." "Many things in the Coalition don't make sense." "Reeves." Zix stepped down from her platform and moved to the viewport that showed the gas giant below, its swirling storms a backdrop to their conversation. This station monitors movement through the Helios corridor. If it falls, we lose eyes on a critical approach to Coalition space, yet we've been denied resources repeatedly, which suggests either incompetence or deliberate obstruction, Elias offered. Zix turned to face him. A dangerous observation, but not an incorrect one. A moment of silence stretched between them before Zix nodded. You have authorization to take systems offline as needed for repairs. I'll provide security personnel to supplement your engineering teams. As for materials, she returned to her desk and accessed a secure channel on her terminal. I may have alternative supply lines that don't require Coalition approval. Elias raised an eyebrow. That sounds like it's bordering on unauthorized requisition. It borders on keeping this station operational, which is my primary directive. Her tone brooked no argument. Do you have an issue with that, Engineer Reeves? No, ma'am, Elias replied. Just clarifying the parameters of our operation. The parameters are simple. Fix this station by any means necessary. Zix tapped a sequence on her terminal. I've granted you alpha-level access to all systems. That includes security feeds and command logs. I want total transparency between us. Elias blinked in surprise. Alpha-level access was typically reserved for the station commander and first officer only. That's unusual. These are unusual circumstances. Zix's expression was unreadable. I need someone who sees what I see and isn't afraid to act on it. Your record suggests you might be that person, despite your tendency toward insubordination. I'm flattered, Elias said dryly. Don't be. It's simply practicality. She deactivated the holographic display. Begin with life support and power distribution. I want hourly updates. Understood. As Elias turned to leave, Zix added, And Reeves, watch your back. Not everyone on this station wants it to survive. The warning stayed with Elias as he made his way back to engineering. It seemed paranoid, but given the state of Helios Station and the strange reluctance of command to address it, perhaps paranoia was warranted. The next 3 days passed in a blur of diagnostics, emergency repairs, and too little sleep. Elias reorganized the engineering teams, implementing a rotation that maximized efficiency while allowing for necessary rest periods. With Zix's security personnel supplementing his crews, they managed to stabilize the environmental systems and begin the lengthy process of replacing damaged power conduits. It was during the replacement of a junction box in Section 19 that Elias made the first disturbing discovery. The burnt-out components showed signs of tampering, subtle, but unmistakable to someone with his training. The failure hadn't been due to normal wear and tear or even neglect. Someone had deliberately sabotaged it. He documented the evidence and continued the repairs, keeping the discovery to himself until he could report directly to Zix. By the time his shift ended, he had found 3 more instances of similar tampering, all in critical systems. Rather than using the comm system, Elias made his way to Zix's quarters adjacent to operations. Security protocols meant she would be notified of his approach before he arrived. The door opened as he reached it. Commander Zix sat at a compact workstation, surrounded by holographic displays showing various station metrics. Unlike her office, her private quarters were sparse and utilitarian, with few personal touches aside from what appeared to be a crystalline sculpture on a side table, presumably from her homeworld. Engineer Reeves, she acknowledged without looking up. This is outside normal reporting hours. This isn't a normal report. Elias handed her his datapad. I found evidence of deliberate sabotage in multiple systems. Now she looked up, those amber eyes focusing intently on him before shifting to the datapad. She reviewed the documentation in silence, her expression hardening with each swipe. How many know about this? She asked finally. Just us. I didn't log it in the main system. Good. She set the datapad down. This confirms my suspicions. The station's decline isn't just neglect. It's being helped along. You suspected sabotage. I suspected something wasn't right, Zix clarified. The pattern of failures was too convenient, always just significant enough to warrant concern, but never quite enough to trigger an emergency response from command. Elias leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. So someone wants the station compromised but not destroyed. Why? That, Zix said grimly, is what we need to find out. She stood, moving to a wall panel that slid aside at her touch, revealing a secure safe. From it, she withdrew what looked like a standard engineering toolkit, but with several modifications that Elias didn't recognize. These are Vitraxian diagnostic tools, she explained, seeing his curiosity. They operate on different principles than coalition technology, which makes them harder to detect or counter. We'll use them to continue your investigation without alerting whoever is behind this. We? Elias raised an eyebrow. Yes, Engineer Reeves. We. Zix's tone made it clear this wasn't open for discussion. This station is my responsibility, and I don't delegate when it comes to threats of this nature. Elias nodded slowly. Fair enough. But if we're working together on this, I think you can call me Elias. Zix considered this for a moment. Very well, Elias. You may continue to address me as Commander Zix. He couldn't help the small smile that tugged at his lips. Wouldn't dream of anything else, Commander. For the next week, Elias and Zix conducted their investigation in parallel with the ongoing repairs. They worked in relative secrecy, using the Vitraxian tools to scan systems without triggering alerts and documenting each instance of sabotage they discovered. The pattern became clearer. Key junctions had been compromised in ways that created cascading failures while being difficult to trace back. To deliberate interference. To maintain the pretense of normal operations, they continued their formal briefings in Zix's office, but the real work happened during off hours in secured areas of the station. Elias found himself grudgingly impressed by Zix's technical knowledge and attention to detail. For her part, Zix seemed to develop a cautious respect for his problem-solving abilities and straightforward approach. It was during one of these late-night sessions, deep in the maintenance tunnels of Section 22, that the breakthrough came. They had been tracing a power fluctuation to its source when Elias discovered an unauthorized device connected to the main communications array. This isn't coalition tech, he said, carefully examining the device without touching it. And it's definitely not standard equipment. Zix moved closer, her small form easily navigating the cramped space. It's a signal repeater, she said after a moment, designed to intercept and duplicate transmissions, spying on our communications. No, Zix's voice was tight. Adding to them. See these buffer modules. They're storing data to be transmitted alongside our regular communications bursts. Elias frowned. What kind of data? Let's find out. She connected one of her Vitraxian devices to a nearby access port, careful to avoid direct contact with the unknown technology. After several minutes of working through encryption protocols, she hissed something in her native language that the translator didn't catch, presumably a curse. What is it? Elias asked. Navigational data. System vulnerabilities. Defense protocols. Zix's eyes narrowed. Someone is feeding information about Helios Station to an outside source. The Siraxian Collective. Elias suggested, naming the Coalition's primary adversary in this sector. Possibly, but this isn't their usual approach. Zix continued analyzing the data. This is too careful, too patient. The Siraxians prefer direct assault. A distant rumble shook the tunnel, followed by the distinctive sound of emergency bulkheads slamming shut. Red alert lights began flashing, and the station-wide comm system activated. All personnel, security breach in Docking Bay 3. Unknown hostiles have boarded the station. This is not a drill. Implement Security Protocol Omega-7 immediately. Elias and Zix exchanged looks of grim understanding. Their investigation had triggered a response, or perhaps their timeline had simply run out. We need to get to operations, Zix said, already moving toward the tunnel exit. Wait. Elias caught her arm, stopping her. If there's a breach, the corridors won't be safe. And if someone on the station is working with these hostiles, they'll expect you to head straight to operations. Zix considered this, then nodded. What do you suggest? We continue as we have been, working from the shadows. We know the station better than they do. We use that. A series of explosions rocked the station, closer this time. Emergency lighting flickered, then stabilized. They're targeting the power grid, Elias observed, trying to disable us without destroying the station. They want Helios intact, Zix agreed, which means we still have leverage. For the first time since he'd met her, Elias saw something new in Commander Zix's expression, not just determination or anger, but a fierce, calculating intelligence that reminded him why species like hers had thrived in the unforgiving expanse of space. We need a plan, he said. Zix's mouth curved in what was definitely a smile, though on her alien features it looked more predatory than reassuring. Oh, I have one. And they're not going to like it. Another explosion shook the station, and the lights went out completely, plunging them into darkness. In the red glow of the emergency backup systems, Zix's amber eyes seemed to shine with their own inner light. Follow me, she said, and try to keep up. The Alliance, moving through Helios Station's maintenance tunnels and emergency lighting, reminded Elias of training exercises at the Academy, except this time, the weapons fire echoing through the corridors was devastatingly real. Zix navigated the cramped passageways with surprising agility, her small stature an advantage in spaces designed as afterthoughts between vital systems. Where exactly are we going? Elias asked, ducking beneath a low-hanging conduit. Auxiliary control, Zix replied without slowing. It's a secure facility 3 levels below operations. Completely independent systems, hardened against electromagnetic interference, and unknown to most of the crew. Unknown to most. Elias stopped mid-sentence as realization dawned. You've been preparing for something like this. Zix paused at a junction, checking a small device on her wrist before selecting the right path. I've been stationed on enough compromised outposts to recognize the signs. The Coalition calls it paranoia. I call it survival. They continued in silence for several minutes, the sounds of conflict growing more distant as they descended deeper into the station's infrastructure. Occasionally, Zix would hold up a hand, stopping them completely while she listened for pursuers or checked her device for life signs nearby. Finally, they reached what appeared to be a solid bulkhead with maintenance markings indicating a power relay station. Zix placed her palm against a section of the wall that looked identical to the rest, and a hidden scanner hummed to life, projecting a grid of light over her hand and face. Commander Zix, authorization Epsilon 9 Talic 0, she said softly. The bulkhead slid aside with barely a sound, revealing a compact command center with active displays and emergency power already online. As they entered, the door sealed behind them with a reassuring thunk of magnetic locks engaging. Impressive, Elias admitted, taking in the array of monitoring systems and control interfaces. How long have you had this in place? Since my 3rd week on station, Zix said, moving to the main console, when it became clear that something was wrong. The displays showed multiple views of the station, security feeds switching between locations to track the intruder's progress. Elias counted at least 12 hostiles, moving in coordinated teams through the crew quarters and primary systems areas. They wore unmarked combat suits with full helmets that concealed their species and identities. Not standard Syraxian tactical gear, he noted. Mercenaries. Possibly. Zix activated the communication system. But working for whom is the question. She adjusted the frequency, bypassing the main comm network to access a secure channel. This is Commander Zix to all security personnel. Implement contingency protocol Shadow 7. I repeat, Shadow 7 is now active. Almost immediately, the security feeds showed Coalition security forces changing their tactics. Instead of direct confrontation, they began falling back to defensive positions, sealing off critical sections and establishing choke points at key intersections. "What's Shadow 7?" Elias asked. "A containment strategy. Instead of trying to repel the boarders immediately, we isolate them from critical systems and gather intelligence." Zix pulled up a station schematic. "While they think they're pushing us back, they're actually being herded into predetermined zones where we can monitor them more effectively." Elias studied the schematic, noting the strategic positioning of security teams. "Smart, but they'll eventually realize what's happening. By then, it won't matter." Zix's fingers danced across the controls. "I need to know who they are and what they're after. And I need to identify our internal saboteur." "You have a suspicion." Zix glanced at him. "Several. But suspicions aren't evidence." Working methodically, they established a security perimeter around their hidden command center and began analyzing the station's status. The damage was significant but controlled. Power to non-essential systems had been cut, and several sections had been vented to space to contain fires, but the critical infrastructure remained largely intact. "They know what they're doing," Elias observed grimly. "These aren't random attacks. They're systematically isolating key systems without destroying them." "Agreed." Zix pulled up the personnel roster. "Where is Lieutenant Merrick? He should be coordinating the security response, but I don't see him on any of the feeds." Elias checked the life signs monitors. No reading for his biometric signature in any of the active sections. Zix's expression darkened. "Check the logs. When was the last time his credentials were used to access a secure area?" After a moment of searching, Elias found what they were looking for. Docking Bay 3, 18 minutes before the breach. He used his override codes to disable the proximity sensors. "Our saboteur," Zix said, her voice cold with certainty. "Access his personnel file. I want to know everything about him." As Elias compiled the information, a pattern emerged. Lieutenant Soren Merrick had been transferred to Helios Station 8 months earlier, shortly before the first reports of system degradation. His previous postings all showed similar patterns: unexplained equipment failures, security breaches, personnel transfers, but nothing was ever traced back to him. "He's good," Elias admitted reluctantly. "Stays just below the threshold of suspicion, creates plausible deniability. And now he's guiding our attackers through the station." Zix studied the security feeds. "We need to find him." A notification flashed on one of the displays, an override attempt on the main reactor control systems. "They're trying to take control of the power grid," Elias said, already moving to counter the intrusion. "If they succeed, they'll have the entire station at their mercy." Working in tandem, Elias and Zix implemented security protocols and rerouted critical functions through their isolated systems. It was like playing a complex game of chess, anticipating the attackers' moves and placing obstacles in their path without revealing their own position. "They're persistent," Elias muttered after blocking another attempt to access life support controls. "And they know our systems too well. Merrick has been feeding them information for months," Zix replied, her focus never wavering from her own task of coordinating the security teams. "But he doesn't know everything." She activated a series of commands that caused sections of the station to suddenly go dark on the monitoring systems. Alarms blared briefly before being silenced. "What did you just do?" Elias asked, watching as confusion spread among both the intruders and their own security forces. "I've initiated a station-wide systems reset," Zix explained. "All automatic functions are temporarily offline. Manual overrides only, and those require physical presence at control junctions." "You've blinded them," Elias realized. "But you've also blinded our own people. Our security teams have been drilled for this scenario. The intruders haven't." Zix's amber eyes gleamed in the dim light of the command center. "Now we take back my station." The next few hours were a carefully orchestrated ballet of tactical maneuvers, using their knowledge of the station's layout and the limited communication channels still available to them. Zix directed her security teams to contain and isolate the intruders. Meanwhile, Elias worked to secure critical systems and prevent further sabotage attempts. It was during one such effort that they intercepted a transmission between Merrick and what appeared to be the leader of the boarding party. "The commander has implemented Shadow 7. Merrick's voice came through, tense and frustrated. "She's cutting off our access to primary systems. Find her," the response came, the voice distorted through layers of encryption. "Without her authorization codes, we can't complete the upload." "Upload?" Elias glanced at Zix. "What are they trying to install in our systems?" "Nothing good," Zix replied grimly. "Can you trace Merrick's location from that transmission?" Elias worked quickly, triangulating the signal through the few communication relays still under their control. "He's in the secondary data core, sublevel 5. "Convenient," Zix said. "That's where our long-term archives are stored, including complete schematics of the